And next we have Peggy Thompson.
Taking my own minutes. When you get old, you need these. Lani, my dear friend, we all miss you to our cores and in our hearts. You are so many things to so many people on so many different levels. To me, you were a great intellectual depth, an endangered critical thinker, and an uncompromising warrior for the causes you embraced and which formed part of who you were. You had the driest and keenest sense of humor of any person I'd ever met. In fact, some of your humor was so sharp that when it fell on the ears of the doll, they didn't even know you were joking. As I was thinking about my thoughts to share of what Lani meant to me and the void she's leaving, I pictured Lani with her giant red pen, listening and looking at what I was going to say, ready to edit the hell out of it, as she did everything that I ever gave to her. But I would certainly embrace that help today. I knew Lani for over 42 years, beginning our first year of law school at the University of Utah. Lani and I were in the class of 1982. 20% of our class were women, and 5% were truly type A's. And that is how and why I met Lani. It was clear from the first week of law school that this woman was intense, smart, and determined to excel. Her sense of humor was well hidden the first 2 years of law school. She was all business. You could see it in her unblinking, piercing eyes. As I got to know Lani, I came to understand that her strength was not only from who she was at her core, but she was driven in part by the fact that she had come to law school after she had started a family, and not just any family. A family with a husband who did not want her going to law school and did everything he could to sabotage her success. She had a family with darling twin boys who looked like angels, like they do today. But as we all know, they have that devilish twinkle in their eye that usually governs their behavior. I think they were around 3 years old when Lani started law school. I, as did others in law school who came to know her, truly respected her for all she did with what appeared to be little effort. She was a superstar student, a loving mother, and eventually a very dear friend. She never had time to socialize with us our first 2 years of law school, while the rest of us on weekends were drinking ourselves into comas. And after school, because of the stress, she would head straight home to take care of her twin boys and manage the house for her husband. After our first year, against what appeared to be all odds, Lani ranked 5th in our class. That may not sound like much to many of you, but we're talking about law school with a class of over 120 people who their entire lives had been told how smart they were and how much better they were than everyone else, and the competition was fierce. Despite her success, and you all know this about Lani, you would never know it because she was always humble. Despite her not being around her first and second year, Lani and I both made and were voted on as editors on the Utah Law Review. And the Utah Law Review, for those of you who don't know what it is a prestigious organization at most law schools that put up publications 4 times a year that are written by second and third year students on law review and academic authors nationally. Well, our law review was in the basement of the law school, and it was anything but prestigious. There were bare walls, and we had tiny little cubicles to sit in. And while Lani would come our second year, whenever we had to be there for copy work, she was very seldom there because, she would rush home to be a mom, a husband, and try to get through the mounds of homework that we always had. When we were voted onto the board, we became very, very good friends because we spent every day in the basement with Scott and with Josh. We became the village with Lani that helped raise them during that year. And that was truly a challenge, as most of you who know the boys. They started fires in garbage cans. They found every empty box in the entire basement, built forts that were too high and they'd fall off and get hurt. Then they'd rip them to shreds and put the trash all the way through the basement, so we'd have to run behind them and clean it up before the building manager came in. They were always indignant when I would stop them doing something terrible and tell them they had to behave. They'd look at me emphatically and say, "You are not the boss of this building." I was always in awe at how patient Lani was with them. No matter how much trouble and no matter how many times a day they were in trouble. It was amazing then, and it continued to be amazing as they grew older, even today. Lani's boys were the center of her universe, and everything else was a juggling act around that universe, including law school. On the weekends, we wouldn't see Lani, but every Monday morning she'd come back with the boys' stories. There were a lot of them. But one of the ones that always made me chuckle when I thought about it is she told us about taking the boys to the zoo. It was in the middle of winter. It was freezing cold. She had them all bundled up in coats and mittens and hats and boots. And when they came out of the zoo, and I don't remember which one because it could have been either of you, said, "Mom, it's really cold. My penis got cold. Do they make mittens for penises?" Lani excelled in law school all the way through. She graduated Order of the Coif, was 5th in her class at graduation, and was, as I said, voted to be the administrator, editor of Law Review. It was during that time that Lani got the nickname Queen of the Blue Book and Queen of the Red Pen. When we were on Law Review, every legal citation and a legal article to be published had to be cited in this incredibly complicated and stupid way set forth in this blue book. And as Lani did with everything she did in her life, she knew it by chapter and verse. We couldn't even tell you where a comma went, but she sure could. No one messed with Lani or her edits or her directives because we knew she was always right. She was right about the legal citations, the grammar, the punctuation, and organization. Lani was a great editor, as I know you guys saw in her later years. And most of all, she was a perfectionist. We never quit until it met her standards, and sometimes it took a long time. We were sure at certain points that Lani was sacrificing animals in her office. When the paper she edited came out, it looked like blood was dripping from the pages with that red pen. That was the norm, not the exception. Right before her third year of law school started, Lani and I decided we were going to be grown up and meet and figure out how we were going to manage Law Review. Well, we weren't very grown up and did some pretty stupid things. And one of them that I still remember is we accidentally locked ourselves in an office in the law school before school started. It was pre-cell phone, pre-laptops, and we didn't realize when we walked in the door it locked from the outside. So we did all our business. We were so serious and proud of ourselves, and then we got up to leave, and we couldn't get out. And we didn't know what the heck to do. We tried everything banging. Nobody was in the school. So there was a landline and a directory, and we called the couple professors who knew we were goofballs and would think it was pretty funny, but they didn't answer. Then we decided to call the dean. And I can tell you, calling him and having him come and let us out started our law school career as the great managers, not off on a great foot. When, as you all know, when Lani graduated, she moved to San Francisco to work for a law firm, and we would call each other pretty regularly to talk about the travails of being a young lawyer and how hard it was and how stressful. And I remember, and we'd always talk about the stupid things we did and how embarrassing things were. And I remember this one time I was telling her something really stupid I'd done. And when I got done, she goes, "Oh, that is nothing. Let me tell you what happened to me last week." And she told me a senior lawyer had asked her to be second chair on a case, which was a very big deal. And they had driven to the courthouse, and this was in 1983, so there weren't word processors, electronic documents, fancy copiers. And they had all of the trial material in boxes in the back of his trunk. And there was oral argument before the trial began, and they took the oral argument material in, and the senior partner realized he'd forgotten his notebook. He sent her out to the car to get it. She came back in. When they went outside, it was pouring rain. And they got to their car, and Lani, to her horror, realized she had not shut the trunk when she was trying to get back to the courtroom, and had drenched and soaked all the trial material. Well, we didn't talk about what happened after that, but I am absolutely confident that Lani figured out some way to fix it, because she always did. After Lani married Tom and moved to Pasadena, we would talk pretty infrequently because we were both on our own paths. But I remember the conversation where she told me that she was pregnant, and then later that she'd had a little girl and they'd named her Kate. And every conversation and every time we saw each other at Christmas, she only talked about Kate, just like she did with the boys. Kate's so smart. Kate did this. Kate's going to do this. She is so awesome. And you know, Kate, you are awesome. And she was so proud of you. I talked to Lani a few times during those horrible, dark times when Tom left her. Those were some of her most dark and difficult days. But as Kate talked, she grew and she became a bigger and better and more whole person out of that. When Lani moved to Salt Lake after the divorce, we started spending a lot of time together. We'd go to lunch, we'd call each other, we'd do Zoom calls, and we'd talk. We thought we were so damn smart. We would analyze U.S. Supreme Court arguments that we'd both listened to before we got together. We'd talk about politics and how stupid the politicians were, and various other life events. We were sure we were the only two on earth who had the right perspective, and we could fix anything. When Lani was diagnosed with breast cancer for the third time, we spent more and more time together, either in person or on Zoom, because I was out of the state a lot. We shared the tough and changing world we lived in. We shared her peeporamas. I got to see everybody's competition and vote, even though my vote didn't count. We shared her thoughts on her mortality and her concern for Scott, Josh, and Kate when she was gone. We agreed to disagree, and vehemently did so, over whether there was a God. I told her even if she didn't believe, I was going to pray for her, and she just have to accept it. She begrudgingly said she would, but never to mention it again. My daily or multi-daily weekly talks with Lani were the highlight of my last 2 years. I always knew she would have something amazing to talk about, and she did. During that time, I had her read my court filings and give me insight on my really difficult oral arguments. We would analyze tough, complex issues I was facing, and she always came up with points I didn't think about, but became my major points and winning points. I really miss her insight in those chats. When Kate came to live with Lani to help her, we had all kinds of chats about Kate's rescue cats, especially Screech. The baby cat she brought in to save and all that entails in those endeavors, including wiping their little butts with a wet rag to make them learn to poop. The baby cats became a big part of Lani's life. One time, we were in the middle of a Zoom call and she jumped up and she said, "Oh my gosh, I've lost the cat." And I go, "What?" She goes, "That kitten, it was in here." She tore her entire office apart and she found it all curled up in a corner, sound asleep, not aware that poor Lani the mama was freaking out. We shared the loss of one of Kate's cats unexpectedly and the loss of Kalua, her longtime companion. Kate, you were a godsend for Lani. She was so very grateful to know you were there. Scott, she always looked forward to you coming over to educate her on a new topic and to fix things. And Josh, Melissa, and Molly, she always talked about your visits and how excited she was when you'd come and how sad she was when you'd go home. Lani's sense of humor did not wane during her illest hours. I remember one day doing Zoom and she came on and she had on a cat mask she'd made. and I looked at her and she said, "Did you read that article about that lawyer?" And I go, "I did." And she goes, "Well, this is what I'm sure the judge saw. What happened is this lawyer's computer was down and he went and used his legal assistant's computer to do a Zoom hearing, and the assistant had a cat persona. So when he came on the Zoom call with the judge, he was a cat, and that was Lani's impersonation. When her hair fell out with the chemotherapy treatment, she had a small line of hair, and I know you guys remember this, right down the middle. Well, one day we started our Zoom call, and I clicked on, and she scooped it all together in the middle and had it over in a little wave. And she goes, "Do you recognize me? I'm a Cupid doll." I was honored to be able to spend some of Lani's last days on earth with her and with many of you. Even in her gravest and darkest pain, she held her dignity and her gratitude for everyone. I was able to embrace her and share our friendship for a last time. All the time I had with Lani was such a gift. Lani, I miss you. Thank you for sharing your life with me. Thanks.
Thank you, Peggy. That was great.